The 90-day mark is not a milestone, it is a graveyard. In the initial weeks of a collapse, adrenaline sustains the unprepared and inventory sustains the hoarder. This is the acute phase, characterized by panic, violence, and the erratic consumption of accessible resources. But by month 3, the dynamic shifts catastrophically from acute crisis to chronic decay. The screaming is stopped, the fires have burned out, and the silence that follows is far more dangerous than the noise. This is the great filter. This is the mathematical boundary where the store-bought survivor dies and the operator begins to exist. Most strategies fail here because they are predicated on a confident mistake. The belief that survival is a product of consumption. You have been trained by a consumer economy to solve problems by purchasing solutions. You bought the freeze-dried food, the batteries, the ammunition, and the solar generators. You treated preparedness as a shopping list. By the 12th week, that list is exhausted. The shelves are not just empty, they are dusty. The psychological impact of opening a cabinet to find it barren breaks the will of those who rely on external inputs. Month 3 introduces a new enemy that no amount of ammunition can kill: entropy. The physical world begins to degrade. The infrastructure that you ignored because it was invisible, sanitation, footwear, mechanical leverage, starts to disintegrate. This is the era of the broken tool. The tactical gear purchased for its aesthetic appeal in the pre-collapse world fails under the stress of daily, rough-use manual labor. A knife that was designed for opening Amazon packages snaps when prying wet wood. Boots held together by cheap adhesive delaminate in the mud. The sanitation system backs up, turning your fortress into a biological hazard zone. You are no longer fighting marauders, you are fighting physics, and physics always wins against a passive opponent. The amateur looks at their dwindling pile of beans and bullets and despairs. The strategist looks at their tools and calculates the capacity for maintenance. The separation between the living and the dead in this phase is not defined by who has the most food, but by who has the means to produce, process, and repair. The prepper mindset of hoarding finished goods is a trap. Finished goods are finite. When the last can is opened, you starve. When the last pair of boots fails, you are immobilized. When the axe dulls and you cannot sharpen it, you freeze. You must purge the consumer mentality immediately. You are moving into an economy of repair and raw extraction. The only value that exists in month 3 is the value you can extract from the environment using mechanical advantage. If you cannot bore a hole, re-sole a shoe, grind a grain, reshape metal, or sterilize a bandage, your stockpile is just a countdown timer to your extinction. The survivors of this phase are those who understood that civilization was just a machine that kept chaos at bay. And now that the machine has stopped, they must become the mechanics of their own existence. The illusion of safety provided by consumption is over. Now you must build the infrastructure of survival from the ground up, using tools that the modern world deemed obsolete. The first casualty of a collapsed grid is not law and order, it is hygiene. By month 3, the modern plumbing system has transformed from a convenience into a lethal biohazard. The water pressure is gone. The sewage treatment plants have ceased operation. Every toilet in your immediate vicinity is a stagnant reservoir of cholera and dysentery waiting to breach your immune system. You cannot flush. You cannot ignore it. The amateur solution is the shovel. This is a caloric death trap. Digging a latrine deep enough to be safe, below the fly line and away from the water table, Using a spade is exhausting, back-breaking labor that burns thousands of precious calories you can no longer replace. In a starvation scenario, high-exertion digging is not work. It is slow suicide. You will tire, you will cut corners, and you will dig shallow pits that fester and spread disease. The shovel is an implement of the surface. Survival in month 3 requires depth. Enter the manual auger. This is the tool that civilization forgot because it had excavators and auger attachments for tractors. You do not have diesel. You do not have hydraulics. You have muscle and physics. A 6-inch or 8-inch manual post-hole auger is the only viable method for establishing sustainable sanitation infrastructure. With a simple twisting motion, you can bore a hole 4 feet deep in a fraction of the time, and with a fraction of the energy required to dig a trench. This creates a deep, narrow latrine that is easily capped and managed, significantly reducing the surface area available to vectors like flies. It allows you to compartmentalize waste deep underground, sequestering the biological threat away from your living quarters and your food supply. This is not about comfort. It is about keeping the bacterial load of your camp below the threshold that kills you. But the utility of the auger extends beyond waste. It is the primary engine of defensive construction. In month 3, you are no longer hiding. You are establishing a perimeter. You need to erect barriers, fences, and palisades to channel movement and deny access. A shovel cannot dig a post hole efficiently. Trying to set a defensive line of timber posts with a spade is a multi-day operation that leaves you exposed and exhausted. The auger allows you to sink 20 posts in a single day. It allows you to build verticality. It allows you to construct the structural ribs of a fortification. Furthermore, the auger is a tool of concealment. You can bore caches for supplies, narrow, deep vertical silos that are easily camouflaged and difficult for looters to detect with probes. The shovel leaves a scar on the earth. The auger leaves a puncture wound that heals quickly. Stop looking at the horizon for threats and start looking at the ground. If you cannot penetrate the earth efficiently, you cannot live on it. Mobility is the primary determinant of survival. If you can move, you can escape threats, locate resources, and dictate the terms of engagement. If you are static, you are a target. The most critical component of your mobility platform is not your vehicle, which ran out of fuel weeks ago, but your feet. Yet, the modern tactical boot is a catastrophic failure waiting to happen. Contemporary footwear manufacturing relies almost exclusively on chemical adhesion, glues, and heat-bonded synthetics. These compounds have a shelf life. They are susceptible to hydrolysis, a process where moisture breaks down the chemical bonds in polyurethane midsoles. In the controlled environment of the pre-collapse world, this was a warranty issue. In month 3, wading through mud, debris, and chemical runoff, it is a death sentence. Your boots will fail. It is not a matter of if, but when. The sole will separate from the upper, usually at the moment of highest torque, when you are running or climbing. When this happens, you are effectively crippled. You cannot run from a threat while your sole is flapping against the ground. You cannot traverse broken glass and rusted metal barefoot without incurring lacerations that will lead to sepsis. Duct tape is a pathetic, temporary desperation measure that provides zero traction and fails within hours of wet use. You are left immobile, reducing your strategic value to that of a stationary turret. You cannot scout. You cannot scavenge. You become a burden to your unit, consuming calories while contributing no labor. The solution is the cobbler's last and a heavy-duty stitching all. These are the tools of the old world that understood shoes were assets, not disposables. A cast iron last provides the anvil necessary to reshape and hold the boot from the inside. The stitching awl allows you to bypass the failure of modern glues by implementing mechanical adhesion. You must physically sew the rubber sole to the leather upper, using waxed thread that resists rot. This creates a bond that is impervious to heat, moisture, and chemical degradation. With these tools, you can scavenge ill-fitting or damaged footwear from the dead and reconstruct them to fit the living. You can replace a worn-out sole with a strip of tire tread. You stop relying on the finite supply of new boots and gain the ability to maintain indefinite mobility. In a world where movement is life, the man who can keep his group marching is more valuable than the man who can shoot. Calories are the fuel of the human engine, and by month 3, your tank is empty. The freeze-dried meals are long gone. The canned goods have been consumed. The easy calories of the pre-collapse world have vanished. What remains in the environment, and perhaps in your deep storage if you were partially wise, are raw grains, whole wheat berries, field corn, dried soybeans. This leads to the most humiliating death in a survival scenario: starvation amidst plenty. You have 500 pounds of hard red winter wheat, but you have no way to process it. You are a human being, not a ruminant. You do not have a rumen. You do not have a gizzard. Your digestive system cannot break down the cellulose hull of a whole raw kernel efficiently. If you boil whole wheat berries, you burn excessive amounts of precious fuel to create a chewy, indigestible sludge that passes through your system largely unabsorbed. You will starve with a full stomach because you cannot access the caloric density locked inside the shell. This is why the cast iron grain mill is the key to the caloric kingdom. Note the specification: cast iron. The cheap plastic housing hand mills sold to hobbyist bakers will shatter under the torque required to crack field corn or roasted soybeans. You need a burr grinder made of heavy metal that can bolt to a workbench and withstand daily violent abuse. This tool transforms inedible, rock-hard seeds into flour and meal. It unlocks the biochemistry of survival. Once ground, that wheat becomes bread, which provides rapid energy. That corn becomes meal for tortillas or porridge. You turn animal feed, which is often all that is left to scavenge from farms or abandoned silos, into human sustenance. Furthermore, the grain mill allows you to process wild scavenged carbohydrates. Acorns, mesquite pods, and wild tubers can be dried and ground into flour to extend your supplies. Without a mill, these resources are useless to you. The mill also dictates your storage strategy. You cannot store flour. It goes rancid in 6 months due to the oxidation of nut oils. You must store whole grains, which last for decades, and grind them on demand. If you possess a mill, you control the production of the most basic unit of civilization: bread. If you do not, you are reduced to gnawing on kernels like a rodent, slowly wasting away as your body consumes its own muscle tissue to compensate for the calories you possess but cannot unlock. The breakdown of the industrial supply chain reveals a harsh truth: all tools are consumable items. In a static world, a shovel lasts a decade. In a survival environment where tools are used daily for heavy excavation, demolition, and combat, edges degrade rapidly. The steel chips, rolls, and blunts. A dull axe is dangerous. It glances off the wood instead of biting, redirecting energy into your shin. A dull machete requires 3 swings to do the work of 1, tripling your caloric expenditure. Most preppers have stocked delicate Japanese whetstones or ceramic rods. These are instruments of vanity designed to put a razor edge on a safe queen pocket knife. They are useless for repairing the catastrophic damage sustained by working tools. You cannot grind out a quarter-inch chip in a felling axe with a 1000 grit water stone. You need to remove metal, and you need to do it aggressively. This is the domain of the high-carbon file set. You require a bastard mill file, a second cut file, and a rat tail file. These are not accessories. They are the primary means of maintaining your mechanical advantage. When you strike a rock while digging a latrine, the file restores the shovel's edge so it can slice through root systems again. When your machete impacts a nail in a scavenged timber, the file reshapes the blade profile, but the file offers a capability far beyond maintenance: fabrication. In month 3, you will run out of manufactured tools. You'll need to create them. A file allows you to take a piece of scrap rebar and profile it into a gig for spearing fish or a defensive spike. You can file a bevel onto a piece of leaf spring from a wrecked truck to create a heavy-duty chopper. Possessing a file set makes you a blacksmith without a forge. It gives you the power to alter the geometry of steel. Without one, you are at the mercy of the initial hardness and edge retention of your tools, which will inevitably fail. You will watch your expensive gear degrade into blunt clubs, while the operator with a $20 file set turns scrap metal into lethal, efficient instruments. In the economy of the collapse, he who can sharpen the edge rules the resources. He who cannot is simply waiting for his tools to become as useless as he is. The era of modern medicine ends the moment the pharmacy closes. By month 3, the antibiotic stockpile is exhausted. There are no more sterile dressings, no more sealed surgical kits, and no more trauma pads. In this environment, infection is the apex predator. A minor laceration from a rusty nail or a slip of a knife, which was once a trivial annoyance, becomes a lethal event. Sepsis does not care about your tactical proficiency. It kills slowly, painfully, and reliably. The confident mistake made by most is assuming that boiling water is sufficient for sterilization. It is not. Boiling water reaches 212 degrees Celsius. This kills active bacteria, but it fails to destroy bacterial spores, dormant armored pathogens like Clostridium tetani and gas gangrene, which can survive boiling for hours. To kill spores, you need physics that an open pot cannot provide. You need 250 degrees Celsius under pressure. This is the strategic role of the pressure canner. Do not confuse this with a pressure cooker designed for pot roasts. You need a heavy-gauge aluminum canner with a dial gauge capable of holding 15 psi. While the amateurs are trying to preserve green beans, the operator understands that this device is actually a field autoclave. It is the only piece of non-electric equipment capable of achieving the thermal parameters necessary to sterilize medical equipment and textiles completely. In month 3, you cannot throw away a bandage. Cotton gauze is a finite resource. When a dressing is soaked in blood and pus, you must wash it, pack it, and cycle it through the canner at 15 psi for 30 minutes. This process resets the biological clock of the material, allowing you to reuse disposable items safely. It allows you to sterilize metal instruments, tweezers, hemostats, sewing needles, and blades, ensuring that when you stitch a wound, you are not sewing infection directly into the bloodstream. Without a pressure canner, every medical intervention is a gamble with gangrene. With it, you maintain a sterile chain of custody for your tools. You convert a kitchen appliance into a Tier 1 medical asset that separates a survivable injury from a funeral. The transition from a consumer of goods to a producer of survival is the only psychological adaptation that matters. The previous 6 parts of this briefing were not a shopping list. They were a restructuring of your reality. You must understand that the prepper industry is designed to sell you the feeling of safety, packaged in plastic and cardboard. But safety is not a product, it is a process. It is the continuous application of mechanical advantage to solve life-threatening problems. The hoarder believes that if he buys enough supplies, he can outlast the collapse. This is a fatal calculation. You cannot outlast a permanent change in the state of the world. You must adapt to it. The hoarder dies when his inventory hits zero. The operator survives because his inventory is the raw material of the earth itself, and he possesses the specific tools required to harvest it. Review your assets immediately. If you have 1,000 pounds of wheat but no cast iron mill, you have nothing but bird feed. If you have a closet full of antibiotics but no pressure canner, you have a decaying medical capability that will expire in a year. If you have a high-end rifle but no files to maintain your entrenching tools, you will die of exposure in a shallow hole you couldn't dig deep enough. These 5 tools, the manual auger, the cobbler's lass, the grain mill, the file set, and the pressure canner, represent the infrastructure of a new civilization. They are currently invisible to the masses. They are cheap. They are available. They are sitting in dusty corners of hardware stores and antique shops, ignored by the tactical consumers fighting over ammunition. This window of availability is temporary. When the realization of the month 3 dynamic hits the general population, these items will vanish instantly. They will not be restocked. There is no factory coming back online to cast iron for grain mills. There is no global supply chain to ship augers from overseas. What exists now is all there ever will be. You have a narrow operational window to secure the means of production before the currency collapses or the shelves are stripped. Do not wait for the crisis to validate this analysis. By the time the need is obvious, the asset will be unattainable. Stop collecting. Start building. Secure the means to maintain your existence independent of a system that is already dead. The time for theory is over.